Welcome to the FaithFlex Podcast, your sanctuary for soulful exploration and practical wisdom, where spiritual growth joins together with the hustle of daily life. I'm your host, Monica Roxanne. I'm so glad you decided to join me and countless others because this is your moment for reflection, for growth, for real life change. Whether you're seeking a whisper of inspiration or a robust blueprint for action, the FaithFlex Podcast stands as a testament to the daring spirit within all of us. So, to my pursuers and my dreamers, to my doers and believers, our journey awaits. Welcome. Hey fam, welcome to another episode of the FaithFlex Podcast. I'm your host, your girl, Monica Roxanne, and I'm so glad you decided to join me this week as we continue to bridge the gap between faith-based principles and practical living. So today's episode, we're going to dive into the delicate balance between grace and action in our journey of faith. So our topic of conversation is the responsibility in faith, balancing grace and action. So let's just jump in. What is responsibility? Responsibility really entails the acknowledgement of one's duties, obligations, and commitment, both towards oneself, towards others, in alignment with one's faith and value. So what does that mean? You have to acknowledge the things that you're committed to, your duties, your responsibilities, your obligations, your commitments, not just to others, right? Like showing up for work on time, going to church on time, completing a task on time. Those are your responsibility. Paying your bills on time. Those are your responsibilities. But it also not just to others, but to yourself. Some of the things that you're responsible for yourself, like self-care, treating yourself well, speaking good and positive things over yourself that aligns with our faith and value. What does the Bible say about responsibility? The Bible talks about responsibility as a great blessing and grace that comes with great responsibility. So Luke chapter 12, verse 47 to 48 says that slaves who knew his master's will and did not get ready or act in accordance to his will receive many blows. But the one who did not know it, committed acts deserving a beating, will not receive as many blows. For everyone who has been given much, much will be demanded, and to whom they have been trusted much, of him they will be asked for all the more. So basically the scripture we've known in the Old Testament is basically too much is given, much is required. Responsibility means that we are to acknowledge what our duties are, our obligations, our commitments. So as we progress and as we grow as individuals and our responsibilities or things that we become responsible grow, then there's more of an expectation, a greater requirement for us to either deliver or to be more mature. There's a increased level of moral ethics that we have to adhere to as we become knowledgeable and we understand God's will for our lives. We understand what he's asking us to do. There's a responsibility that we have to just grow as people. What does that mean? So like with our giftings and our talents, we have a responsibility to nurture them and to steward them and to operate in the best level of integrity when it comes to our gifts and talents that God has blessed us with. 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 10 says, as each one of us has received a special gift, employ it in the serving one another as good stewards of the multifaceted grace of God. So again, let me read that again. 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 10. As each one of us have received a special gift or gifts, multiple gifts, employ it in serving one another as a good steward of the multifaceted grace of God. This reminds me of the story in the Bible about the talents. And so the master gives 3 slaves 5 talents. And then based on their actions and how they steward and how they manage and how they grew their talents, then it was attached to a reward. And so we know of the story that there was 2, that one was able to double the talents like majorly, and then the next was able to double another talent. But the next thing that became an issue was the last one that they took their talent and buried it. There was no growth at all. Nothing going on, nothing happening. It was, I just went and hid my talents and didn't take the responsibility of actually maturing, growing their talents, as we are ordained to do. So Galatians 6:5 says, for each one of us will bear his own load. What does it mean? We are responsible for ensuring that we're handling these responsibilities, these duties properly, in good integrity, with God's focus in mind, with loving kindness and patience. Proverbs 16 verse 3 says, commit your works to the Lord and your plans will be established. What does that mean? It's to assess everything that's going on, understand what your responsibilities are, and say, Lord, this is what you've graced me with, and here are the plans. And then he will put his favor onto that. So how do we know that? So how does your role, your of responsibility, in your personal growth and faith, embracing responsibility in our everyday life really fosters personal growth by cultivating discipline. It cultivates good integrity, and it cultivates resilience. You'll often hear me say the same thing for accountability, because without accountability, which is taking ownership, you can't have responsibility. And without responsibility, you can't have accountability. So in essence, embracing responsibility, taking responsibility of your duties, your obligations, your commitments, and your everyday life really fosters a growth of discipline, really fosters a growth of good integrity, and really fosters the maturity of your resolve and your resilience. It strengthens your faith by demonstrating your trustworthiness and commitment to God's plan. And that's what really that story about the 5 talents is about. It was like that the master of this, or the slave owner, basically gave 5 talents to his slave or his servants and say, I want to see how trustworthy you are. So think about all the gifts that God has blessed you with, and the ones that you're not aware of, because I'm sure there's so many hidden gifts that we all have that we haven't tapped into. And then what are you doing with those gifts? Are you maturing them? If you're a psalmist, are you taking class? Are you understanding technique? Are you listening to different genre of music? Are you a dancer? Are you taking class? Are you understanding language and growing your knowledge about the visual arts, performing arts? Are you a musician? Are you practicing on a regular basis, mastering the skill and technique of fingering? Like what is it that God has gifted you? If you're a strategist, are you studying varying strategists, authors in the world, and philosophers and battle tactics? What are you doing to cultivate, to prove, to demonstrate that you can be trusted with more, and that you're committed to what God has called you to do? Because what it says is that once God can trust us with more, and we learn this from the story of the 5 talents, is that moreover, it opens the door for God's favor, right? What it does is it gives God permission. He's like, oh, they got it. I can trust them with more. They're committed to this walk and this purpose in life. So let me give them favor, which is the extra outside of what you can do. God puts his favor on it, and then it's supernatural, it's miraculous. And then people really see that. And so it opens the door for God's favor to work in our lives as we faithfully steward the blessings and the gifts that he's given us. That's what this really is about. That's the role of taking responsibility, right? When we take responsibility and allow it to really permeate our way we think, how we see things, we grow as people, we grow into the faith. And with grace and faith working together, and our part to accept that God has already done, grace has to balance faith, right? So grace is that extension. Grace allows us to give mercy and forgiveness to people. And for ourselves, when we make a mistake, we begin to think about our worth and our value, but that's not really necessary. When we balance grace with faith, we really realize that our part is to accept what God has already done, and grace must be balanced with faith. It is not true so it's not the truth that sets you free. It's the truth that that sets you free. And that's in John 8, verse 32. that typically says, so Jesus was saying to those Jews who had believed in him, if you continue in my word, then you are truly my disciples, and you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. It's not that it is the truth that sets you free. So it's not the actual truth. It's the fact that you know it that sets you free. And the truth is that you need to put your faith in what God has already done, not in what you do, right? When we take on responsibility, that's the role of responsibility in our everyday life and how we grow and how we mature in our faith. So what are some of the components of responsibility? Because again, we hear accountability, we hear responsibility. What's some of the things that show up in responsibility? It's really understanding emotional intelligence, and that's understanding and managing your emotions to make responsible decisions and interact effectively with others. Why is that important? We have to be able to make responsible decisions. It's critically important that we understand how to manage our emotions. So we have to understand how we're feeling. We have to take accountability of our feelings. And then we have to steward and guide and process our emotions so that we are not hasty in our decision making. We're not hasty in our response. We're not hasty in our interaction with people. The next is being accountable. Like I said before, you can't have accountability without responsibility and responsibility without accountability. You have to be accountable. And being accountable is taking ownership of our actions, acknowledging that we may have made a mistake, and then seeking to make amends when it's necessary. So being accountable means I take ownership. Okay. But being responsible means that you acknowledge that you have a duty, you have an obligation, you have commitments to not just yourself, but also towards others that aligns with our faith and value. But accountability, you take full ownership of your actions, acknowledging that you may have made a mistake, and then that you may seek to make amends if necessary. That basically means apologizing, asking for forgiveness, because accountability says, I own my contribution to the challenges of today or to the situation or where I am. And now I need to find a resolution. I need to develop a resolution. I need to seek help so I can have a resolution because I own my part in the situation where I am today. The third component of responsibility is grace, extending grace to ourselves and to others, understanding and recognizing that we are imperfect beings and in need of God's grace and mercy. So remember that grace is mercy and forgiveness. Listen, now let me be very clear when I say this. Extending grace to someone does not give them a pass without holding them accountable for their actions. What it does is it allows you to forgive them. It allows you to show mercy for yourself. Everybody has to be accountable for their actions. We talked about it just seconds ago, that there has to take ownership of your actions and acknowledging your actions. But responsibility says, I acknowledge I got some things I need to handle. There's some things I need to do that have some obligations I need to fulfill. But extending grace says there may be mistakes, there may be some upsets, there may be some fallbacks. It's okay. Let's go back and reassess and learn from our mistakes. But the next thing about responsibility is also, again, self-awareness. Cultivating awareness about yourself, like your strengths, your weaknesses, and then the areas where you want to grow, and then actively doing something about it, right? It's being self-aware. You have to be self-aware. We have to be constantly aware of what we're doing. We have to be present in the moment. We have to understand that we can't move in our lives just haphazardly, but we need to be intentional, and being self-aware allows us to do that. So again, I'm going to go through those components of responsibility. It's emotional intelligence, understanding and managing your emotions. Accountability is taking ownership of your actions. Extending grace to ourselves and others, understanding that we are imperfect beings and that we are in need of God's mercy and forgiveness. And then fourth is being self-aware. We have to be self-aware because it allows us to assess our strengths. It allows us to assess our weaknesses and to determine the areas that we want to grow. And then we can actively do something about it. Now, again, this is the FaithFlex podcast, so we have to come up with ways of how we're going to allow responsibility in our faith to help us balance grace and action. So I have a few ways, and so hopefully these are a blessing to you. The first thing I would like to say is I think set clear boundaries. When you're going to mature and grow in your role of responsibility, or just be more responsible, is to set a clear boundary, define the values and priorities so that they guide your actions and decisions. It's really important to set clear boundaries. The second is to practice self-discipline. Yes, self-discipline. Every single day, we have to practice self-discipline. Again, that goes along with being self-aware, knowing your strengths, your weaknesses, and then figuring out the areas that you want to mature. Develop habits and routines that align with your goals and values, and then hold yourself accountable to them, right? So develop good habits, good routines that align with your goals. So if you set clear boundaries, you've established good goals, you know how you want to move and shape your day, your week, your month, and then you hold yourself accountable to them. The next I would say is to seek wisdom. Seek guidance from scripture, seek guidance through prayer, and again, seek guidance through a trusted friend, mentor, or someone's going to give it to you straight so that you can make wise and responsible choices. Listen, we have the freedom to do what we want. No one's going to tell us yay, nay, or whatever. Do whatever you like. But as a faith believer, we want to do the right thing. We want to be wise in our choices. We want to be wise in our strategy. And we have to be responsible in the choices and decisions that we make, because we already know that being responsible means that we acknowledge where we are. We acknowledge our commitments, our duties and our obligations. But accountability forces us to take ownership of our action, takes ownership of our thoughts, take ownership of our decisions and our behaviors. So when you are seeking wisdom, you want someone that's going to give it to you straight so that you can be responsible and you can be accountable. The next thing is to learn from your mistakes. So if you stumble, if you fail, you make a mistake, it goes completely wrong, or you have a setback, don't just allow that setback to become a resident of where you are in your future. Just allow it to be a setback, but learn from it. Let it be an opportunity for you to grow and to learn and to strive to do better next time. If you don't learn from the mistakes of your past, we can't grow in the future or do better in the future. That's why humanity is so amazing. I said it in a previous broadcast that learning from your mistakes, learning from your setbacks allows you to grow and to strive to be better. And it's important that you be accountable. Mistakes shouldn't be residents in your future, right? They're your past. And because we as humans, we are brilliant. God created humanity out of brilliance. We're smart. We're evolving. In the last 15 years, technology has exploded. I get to communicate with you through technology that has just been created over the last 20 years. So learn from the mistakes of your past. Learn from your mistakes of right now so they do not take resident in your future. That's what a responsible person does. And last but not least, extend grace. It's important. Extend grace to yourself and to others, and recognizing that we all fall short and are in need of God's mercy and forgiveness. So again, grace is a component of responsibility. But when we're trying to figure out how do I be more responsible, again, set clear boundaries, practice self-discipline, seek wisdom, learn from our mistakes, and extend grace. Extend grace to yourself and others, recognizing that we all fall short. We are perfectly imperfect and are in need of God's grace and mercy. So listen, balancing grace and action requires a decent sense of responsibility grounded in our faith. And that's why we're here at the FaithFlex Podcast. We want to take these FaithFlex principles and put some tangible, actionable steps in place so that we can apply it to our everyday living. So when we balance grace, where balance action requires a deep sense of responsibility, just grounded in our value, our faith. As we embrace responsibility in our lives, we grow in our character, we deepen our faith, and open ourselves up to the abundant blessing and favor of God. So listen, that's it for today, guys. I am so glad that you decided to come and hang out with me this week as we talked about responsibility and faith and balancing grace and action. If this blessed you, make sure you like, share, and repost, and let people know to join in on this conversation, because, again, it is important that we take the things that we believe in our faith walk and apply it to today. So listen, I look forward to you hanging out with me next week. And until next time, thanks, everybody. And that's a wrap on today's soul-stirring episode of the FaithFlex Podcast. I hope you're leaving feeling uplifted and equipped to turn your everyday experience into stepping stones for spiritual growth and practical living. Thank you for tuning in and sharing your time with me. Be sure to subscribe, share it with your friends, and leave a review if you enjoyed the journey today. Your support means the world to me, and it helps bring this message to more listeners who are searching for harmony between their spiritual walk and action. Until next time, remember to flex your faith.